Saturday.
It's out there. Saturday we're good. High of 66. It'll actually be football weather, unlike today out there.
Can you give us a 7-day forecast?
Yeah. I can only go 5.
I got the guy coming to take down trees in my yard.
Maybe the press conference now ought to be sponsored by the Weather Channel.
We can have
If Jim Cantor's at your football game, you're
Jim
screwed.
Cantor come in and do this stuff. All right, you guys good in the back? This thing on, it probably helps. All right, so we'll let Coach open with some comments, and we'll go with the questions.
Seems like a long time since we played football. Doesn't take long when the weeks are so action-packed and full of pressure and stress and the number of things that happen, and then you have a glimpse of just the outside world for a little bit. Man, it's time slows down and almost feels like a new season. So first practice today, back at it after a long weekend, and the preparation needed to take on another ACC opponent. Certainly glad to be back home, and hopefully we'll be able to apply a number of the things that we targeted during the bye week. Our hope for the bye week was to restore some health to our team, knowing that won't ever be completely possible, but to restore some health, to assess our personnel and our schemes to see where and how and who is most effective. And then certainly we got some recruiting done as well. So from that standpoint, I'm optimistic and comfortable we got those things done. In terms of how it affected our play and where that stands, I don't think we'll know until we play another game. But I think that the mindset of the players is strong, and their intent to practice and prepare well is strong. So I'll take questions.
How much does your strategy for using the bye week kind of depend on where it falls in the calendar?
Significantly. If you have to have an ideal placement, this is about where it is. I love about the halfway mark. In talking with Ohio's coach, you know, their bye came after week 1, and he was talking about what a challenge that was. And so you always make the best of it wherever it falls, but if I had a choice, yeah, right before or right about the midway point is I think ideal, based on roster, based on personnel, and then sometimes based on opponents coming up. You know, that all plays into it. But it's as good as I could have hoped for.
Bronco, is self-scouting a big part of what you do in a bye week?
It is. Our procedure, like most in college football now, I guess I'm speaking for most, it's ongoing and up to date. So after every game, every call is analyzed in terms of production, and those databases are built upon every single week. All that the bye week really does is it allow you to step back a little bit, and then possibly when you have an idea or two, you can kind of search the country and search the NFL and others that might have similar personnel facing similar challenges to maybe research. That's the part that's hard in game week, is to do extra research to add to your current knowledge base. It's really not the self-scout. That part is fairly easy to keep current, but trying to solve problems that maybe are new or unique or different to your particular roster, you try to see, does anyone else have something similar, and what are they doing? So that's probably where the self-scout led to in the bye week that maybe you don't have time to do in a regular week.
We talked a lot before the season about all the really talented offensive players you guys have, and you know how Bryce's ability kind of opens things up and whatever. How well do you guys think you've balanced the running and the passing and the utilizing of decoys and all that stuff to kind of get the most out of the offense?
Yeah, I think it's been week to week. I think there have been glimpses and moments and games where we've done a nice job, and I think there's been glimpses and moments and games where we haven't. And I think we're learning from those games. Certainly the two teams that I think are strong opponents. Again, much like rankings, it's hard to tell anything until about week 7 or 8 and how good anyone is. But in terms of NC State and in terms of Indiana, I think those two opponents will probably prove to be good opponents and good teams. And so those teams, our formula didn't hold, nor was it the same for our other 3 games. And so we're now in the process of recalibrating, trying to assess after 5 games exactly where we are versus and projecting the talent level versus other teams, and then, okay, which path does that have us take? And we're becoming clearer with that, but I think I can't say that we've done a great job consistently through probably 3 games, yes, and 2 games, no.
Coach, did you get a chance to watch any of Miami's game against Florida State? And what are your impressions of the redshirt freshman quarterback Perry and their 2 running backs?
Yeah, so my wife loves football, so she had us watching the game, and I watched a couple series because I get to watch him on film, straight now for more than what I would like. But he seems to, the quarterback seems to provide a spark and an ability to move the ball a little bit with his legs. And it appears that they're opportunistic, and the energy and the turnovers that their defense creates, their offense then is opportunistic and leverages that. So I think those parts have to be mentioned collectively. But when you have a young player that's earned the starting role and playing good football for a ranked opponent, the future looks bright. And so I think that it might have been, I'm guessing now, that the competition might have been close enough to where the ability to run a little bit more and then investment for the future, those 2 things maybe have contributed to the spark he's giving him.
And he hit some pretty huge passes late in that game. What does it say about his ability to do that as a redshirt freshman?
Just that. ACC football is a highly competitive league and a highly competitive brand, and now you put it Miami and Florida State in a rivalry game, and it looks like he was poised and managed it effectively. And I think that speaks a lot. Maybe not even the ACC, but Miami, Florida State, that probably speaks to maybe his poise.
Does last year's game down in Miami make you any more confident, or sadden you that that didn't
both
fall through?
Yeah, both. That they're we and I at this point, when I look at every game from here through the end of our season, there's certainly a chance that all those games are winnable. Any of them independently and all of them collectively. Conversely, you can flip it the other way. And so when you look at the game from a year ago, we played well enough, long enough to make it really interesting, but not quite well enough and long enough and consistent enough to hold on. So that's kind of where I was headed. Is they believe that they're capable and confident in playing with any opponent, and including Miami. What they also know is they have to build their capability and consistency to finish, and that's the task, is to play as well through the majority of game and then add the other component to close it out. And so the short answer is yes, they're confident, but that isn't specific to Miami. That's really relevant to any team we play from here on out.
Since I know you're involved now more on both sides of the ball, I want to ask you about their defensive line and Willis, the way he plays inside. How has that opened things up for their 2 ends, who seem to also be very effective?
Yeah, well, anytime a 3 technique or anytime a 1 technique requires the double, it just ensures one-on-one outside unless you chip with the running backs. And there's very little time to throw the ball. If you're going to protect conventionally, the ball better be gone quickly. So their edge rushers I think are very good. And if you choose to leave the inside rusher or rushers by themselves, then you can pay there as well. So I think that you have to acknowledge that part of it and know that that's what's generating, in my mind, the turnovers and the change of possessions, which then allows their offense, which is opportunistic, to capitalize. And then there's the momentum factor of once Miami, they feed off that and they become even more skilled and more confident and more assertive once there's a sudden change. And that then the momentum that creates, much like the Florida State game, there's just a couple of plays and then back to back, and the game became different.
And as you look at that front, how do you feel about your offensive line, the evolution, and are there any changes there during the off week?
Really no changes, and we are a work in progress. It shows up on film, and it shows up every week, and so it's still the position that we're not deep enough, and we're building as fast as we can. We're still considering grad transfers and all other possibilities to build that unit, as that is the foundation of our offense. So it's still at risk. It's still a work in progress. It's not stable. It's not deep, and it's inconsistent. But there are glimpses, and there are signs that we're playing at a higher level there than what we have been. But it's slow, and it's steady, and it's methodical in the improvement that we're making.
You said heading into your bye week, the part of your analysis would be to throw out some plays that you don't feel have been effective. Were there many, and is there a strong debate about those? And
No, many is relative, and sometimes plays are tied to concepts. And so I would say you could throw out a concept, and that's one thing. The number of plays tied to it could be a handful or more. So really we're identifying concepts which tie to personnel and tie to application. Some of those concepts just aren't going to fit, and that eliminates a higher volume of plays. In one case, concepts are added that they're projections, but hopefully that will work out in our favor. Really little to no debate because of the numbers. I'm a statistically driven and numbers-oriented coach when it comes to pressure. I love the big picture and thinking about the broader perspective, but under pressure, I want to know the numbers, and then I frame that for the decisions. And some of the things just have to go because they're not working. And maybe it would be like a relationship, where you try as hard as you can, and it's just not going to work. And it's time to break up, kind of like that. And sometimes the harder you've worked at it, the harder it is to let it go. And yeah, so there's a coach or coaches sometimes that get tied to a concept, and it might have worked elsewhere, and they're just working like crazy to make it go, but it hasn't yielded. And my job then is just to say, enough already. Kind of like a parent, I guess. Yeah, there you go.
Coach, according to a story by my colleague Jerry Ratcliffe here, I'm going to give him a plug, jerryratcliffe.com. There's a big meeting Friday to sort of launch a fundraising effort. Thank you. Campaign is the word. And would you mind talking about why you feel, you've talked about it before, and one of the first things you said when you got here was you need a new building. New building, new fields, what this would mean to the program. And second part of the question is, do you feel like your facilities have cost you recruits to, say, Virginia Tech or Clemson or other places?
I'll start in reverse order. The easy answer is yes, certainly. Our facilities have cost us. That's an easy one. Going back to the first part in terms of why a new building is important, more so than anything else, to make a clear and simple statement that Virginia football matters. It's not an afterthought. It's a priority, and we intend to be excellent. Like anything else on grounds, we want to be exceptional, and that alone, the building and the resources to generate that simple statement brings or highlights all the work that's going on behind the scenes. And until those two things are aligned, it's hard to truly have the tipping point that you never have to look back at. It does not mean that it can't happen without it. However, when you consider not beating our rival for 14 years or not being back-to-back bowl games for 14 years, none of that's accidental. It's not an accident. It's been planned for. The choices have been aligned for, and it's time to fix it. And for all those that want great football and all the benefits that come from that, for the university, for Charlottesville, and I think the branding alone, there's so many benefits that have been well documented. And yeah, for those that grasp that, either from an alumni perspective, a business perspective, or a pride perspective, it can be planned for, it can be designed for, and the results will show when that happens. And I'm really excited about the possibilities. I think the master plan has been exceptionally well thought out. I think Carl has done a phenomenal job and with vision and execution to get it to this point. And now the matter of fact analysis is the traction and the support necessary to pull it off. And along the way, right, my job is to continue having football trend upwards and build momentum to make it easier for investors to say, man, this is a good investment. And good is a different topic than necessary. It's absolutely necessary if the University of Virginia wants exceptional football and all the benefits that come from that, and to reflect that it does matter and we want exceptional in all that we do, on grounds, in the classroom, on the sports fields, etc. And I would say the same, not just for football, but for all the other sports. I would go as far as to say that the well-being of the athletic department is tied to football success.
Coach, you don't have too many changes on your depth chart, but one of them is Devontae Cross moving from wide receiver to safety. We talked in the preseason, right, about how he finally had a position, he could finally focus. What sort of necessitated that move, and how would you sort of describe that decision?
Chris Moore will be out for the season, and Brenton Nelson going down in our game against NC State. And those are two players that it's completely reflective of our roster. Just when I say never, and I'm learning my lesson, that we can put a player there and leave him. It's hard to anticipate when you lose, two players in the two deep, either in the secondary or at linebacker or at offensive line or wherever. And so, it's kind of like getting a call on the red phone, where you get close to being out of players. And G. Crowell has a concussion, was diagnosed with a concussion, so that was a third. So there's the two deep just went boom, 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 and okay, now what? And luckily Devontae's had some experience, and he's been training there since middle of last week.
Bronco, back to the notion of offensive balance. Alameda and Hassis have almost 2/3 of your receptions. How much of that is maybe Bryce being too comfortable with them, or Joe and Evan and guys like that not doing enough to make him comfortable with them?
Yeah, it's being driven by production, meaning that Alameda and Hassis keep making plays, play after play after play. And so Bryce and Alameda and Hassis are driving what's happening in terms of production. Tavares Kelly is escalating, and our run game, including JE versus the better teams, hasn't been as effective. And so we certainly, if you consider Hassis and Alameda and Bryce, I like that a lot. I would love to have another receiver and get our running game going as well, and then get Evan Butts cranked up again. So it's more spread, but the reality is the production is disproportionate right now, and hard to consider throwing it or moving the ball in another way when the yield is so tilted, and we're anticipating and pushing and hoping for others to be able to take a share of that. Hasn't happened at the speed we would have hoped to this point, other than Tavares, who is starting to make a push.
You've made a point, excuse me, of reaching out to football alumni and inviting them to be part of the program. Several of them live here in town, including Ahmad Hawkins. You did a video with him. He's involved in the program on a number of fronts. What's it been like, having him around the way he is?
Just a positive presence. I love being around positive, optimistic, and people that have a mindset of achievement with a moral structure of just kindness and decency. And man, when that happens and they've been part of this program, it's just another good example for my coaches, our players. And I probably shared with you that I won't hire anyone that I don't like. And I guess I haven't shared that. Yeah, so they have to be trustworthy, and they have to be really good at what they do. But what a drag it is just to show up at work and be with people you don't like. And and so I don't do that. And so when you now consider former players who are also fit in that category, it's just one other positive influence and another great reason to come to work and be around hopefully like-minded and can-do people that are unified in the challenge.
Bronco back here, just you touched on this a little bit, talking about the safety situation, but just you said you wanted to get as healthy as you could over the bye week. Where did like Brenton and now Jermaine Crowell and some other guys stand health-wise?
Yeah, I wish I could say that it's changed a lot. It really hasn't. What it really did is probably prevented anyone else getting hurt because we didn't play. So rather than here's this health that now has been built, it really was just who else didn't get hurt because we weren't in a competitive situation on Saturday. It'll play out over time, but I'm not sure what the other rosters look like, and nor does it really matter, right? So the job now is to manage the personnel that you have the best possible way you can down the home stretch, and that's a 7-week stretch, and that's what we plan to do.
Coach, just can you talk about your assessment of Miami's receivers on the outside, particularly Cager? And you've talked about before for the defensive backs here, they're in position execution-wise, but you want them to make plays. And where do you assess that they are in that process for this matchup?
It's relative to the opponent. Again, the better the opponent, the fewer plays we're making, the lesser the opponent, the more plays we're making. So what the task is the better teams and the better players, we need to make more critical plays in one-on-one situations. It's the same like when you flip on college football, the number of back shoulder throws and fades, it just is mind-boggling. The RPOs, because of the lineman downfield rule, it's all tied together. And so college football has changed because of the lineman downfield, which is the RPO, which then ties the safeties, which then the receiver's by himself for the fades and back shoulder throws at a higher level. So I don't think we're the only ones where it's apparent that they're called 50-50 balls for a reason. And if you win 51%, you're actually doing a pretty good job. And, I would say we're more 49-ish in that category. And so, we need to swing a few more plays and a few more percentage points against the better teams and the better receivers.
Do you have any update on, Malcolm Cook, his health, where he's at?
He's practicing. Based on what I saw today, still significant ways to go. He'll be listed, I'm sure, as, I forget all the different categories, probable or likely, but he'll have to look different than he did today.
And as an outsider, I thought maybe the open date would be a chance for Dylan Thompson to make up that knowledge of the system and kind of earn himself a spot on the depth chart. Any good news in terms of his progress?
No, actually, bad news. Got a concussion in practice last week.
Brenton is listed on the 2 deep. You mentioned Chris Moore's out for the season. How available? What can you say about Brenton's availability for this week?
We think he'll be available, is what I've been told. Anytime you're dealing with concussions, though, hard to know. Again, and what I love is the protocol because it protects the player and makes sure that he's safe and ready before he comes back. And so we're all relying on the protocol, which I completely support.
Coach, touching back on those 50-50 balls, is there a technique? Is there a drill in practice, or is it just strictly instinctive?
No, there's all kinds of technique and drills in practice and tons of emphasis that has been placed. A lot of times, if you, it's very simple. Maybe as little kids, if you ever played Flies Up or 500, and you put two young kids together and they both see the ball, and sometimes one is 5'11" and the other's 5'5", and they jump. 5'11" guy sometimes catches it more. Unless the 5'5" guy is really kind of crafty and gritty and somehow just battles his way in there. So sometimes it's simple as a matchup. And some receivers are always open just by their height. And so we like our corners a lot. We like our safeties a lot. And statistically, I think they're effective. All that's happened, again, is the game is changing, so where it's more apparent. In college football, again, you can flip on any game, and see about the same thing happening. And what it really leads back to is personnel and the size of players that that you'd like to have at corner, and most are smaller, and most receivers are taller, and see the ball sooner and longer than the defensive back sees the ball, and those two things are advantages. And if the RPOs weren't in effect and the linemen couldn't be downfield, then it'd be easier to have the safeties there. But that change as an offensive coach, however that got passed, I'm not certain. All you're seeing is one of the byproducts of that rule.
Bronco at 3-2, coming off a road loss and a bye week. I think your arrival here made you aware that you needed to be far more in tune with kind of the psyche of this team. What's your assessment of how things went, especially last week when there probably didn't need to be as much focus as there was when you have a game on Saturday, and just kind of where the confidence is, where the focus is, and that kind of thing?
Our focus is strong. Our confidence is good. Our team is angry. Our team now is angry when they lose. They're not dejected or beaten down. They're angry because there were plays left on the field they think they could have made, and they know a handful of those, like any game, possibly would give them a different outcome. And that's becoming clearer and clearer to them. So I think they're determined, and there's resolve, is what I sense from them.
Coach, you've been around a lot of special players in your career, and just want to get you to talk about Olamide. Shout out to the notes here at the media relations staff that Olamide Zaccheaus is the nation's only active player with 2,000-plus receiving yards and 450 rushing yards in a career. He's probably going to surpass reception totals here. What is it like coaching him, and your appreciation for what he brings to the team?
You know, I think I'll frame my comments in a way that's probably not expected or desired, but his improvement from when I arrived, my initial assessment of Olamide in terms of consistency and production to what I see today. So the maturity, consistent, and production without the drama, without the way highs and the way lows, he just is maturing into an outstanding young man, an outstanding football player who's consistent and reliable and dependable. And those things, that's hard for anyone to reach, and that's who he's becoming. So he has the physical skills. He's just able now to produce week in, week out, but more importantly, practice in and practice out. And that's how he's earned my respect.
Bronco, inside linebacker, how comfortable are you with Zane and Rob Snyder moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not. There's just not enough players, and so I love those two. But two's not enough, and so we're continuing to look and assess who else. We've moved T.C. Harrison, a first year, to get some work at that position as well. But yeah, that position is one play away from us being really thin. So I'm completely comfortable with Rob and Zane. I'm not comfortable with the depth of the position, to make it more clear.
Anything else?
Okay, thanks. Yep.